Hello students. This video is a short instructional guide to how to perform exercise 2 on reading science papers. So this week in lab we really aren't going to be meeting for a lab. Instead we'll be doing an independent review of science papers on our own. And this video helps you get through that. So the first thing I want to do is get to my Blackboard site. This is my Blackboard site for section 901, and typically for each exercise, remember, there are kind of some steps to be taken. The first thing you want to do is read the lab manual, this time exercise 2 on reading scientific papers. The second thing you'll want to do is look at any kind of supplemental materials that are available to read before you take the pre-lab quiz. You'll take the pre-lab quiz and then you'll do a worksheet. Typically that worksheet is done in lab, but this week you'll be doing it on your own. And so what's this week all about? Well, this week is about reading science papers. Now, we often as college students, graduate students, professors, we often want to take a look at what other people have done in the field. That interests me. So for example, I study black-capped chickadee behavior in the field of animal behavior. I'm interested in individual variation in foraging behavior among chickadees. Well, in order to really help my research, I need to read what other people have written about this topic. And I want to learn more about this topic. I want to figure out what other people, what other experiments people have run and what are their conclusions. And I want to compare their results to what I'm doing. And so I need to be able to find good peer-reviewed journal articles to read, and I need to be able to read them effectively and understand what they mean. And that's what this assignment is all about. How do we go about finding and reading science articles? And it's sometimes kind of hard. So let's take a look. First thing I need to do is click on my GBSU Save button and my Achieve Lab Exercise information. This will help me arrive at maybe the right content. Okay, so I'm in the content right now, and you can see I'm going to be needing to find exercise 2 materials. And I can see I have a lot of materials here, the pre-lab quizzes here, the overview and the checklist, not as important. The worksheet, I'm going to use a different worksheet, not this one, and a few other things in here as well. This particular RAF, how to read a scientific paper, is probably the most important thing on this list. Okay, in addition to the content here, I'm going to need to go to my lab manual. My lab manual is, of course, this hard to find lab manual, so I'm going to click on my name and find my lab manual so that I can read exercise 2. Read what it's all about. So I open it up, and yes, indeed, here is exercise 2. It starts on page 9 and goes through page 15, it looks like. So I've clicked on that, and let's take a look at this exercise. Reading and explaining scientific papers. So at the beginning, we've got some introductory questions and objectives for the lab. You can skim through those. And a little bit of introductory material about science papers. Okay, now the bulk of this exercise is really all about how do we write and read and explain and find science papers. So the first question that might come to mind is, well, why on earth would we publish our research anyway? This seems fairly obvious. We want to tell other people about our research. And we can do this face-to-face, we can do this at a talk or giving a poster, but probably the way to do it to reach the broadest audience is publish a paper in a peer-reviewed journal. So we try to do that. Okay? To publish your paper in a peer-reviewed journal is quite challenging, and and it requires a lot of work. So when I did some research recently with a few colleagues on black-capped chickadee behavior, I first wrote up my paper. This is after I've done the research, done the analysis, written up the paper. I then sent my paper to a journal, and that the editor of that journal received my paper and said, this is kind of interesting. It looks like it's a paper about individual variation in response to predators by black-capped chickadees. That sounds interesting, but I don't know enough about it. So I'm going to send this article to a series of other reviewers who are experts in this field. And so that editor sent out my article to a couple other people who reviewed the article and said, I think this has validity. I think it's valuable in this field. So here are some ways that you could improve your article, but we would recommend you publishing it. And the editor gets that back, and the editor then sent me a letter that said, hey, we're going to publish your article, but you have to do a bunch of reviewing. You have to make some changes before we do. And I was super happy, and my article just recently got published. Publishing started a long time ago. There's a little bit of history about how and when publishing of science papers started. There's even a very interesting article here from a long time ago about the smallpox vaccination. So it's kind of interesting. You might want to read through that. It's hard to read though. And today, how have things changed? Now, when we write papers, we follow a pretty universal format. Our writing style is pretty similar across all the journals that you look at. All the scientific papers kind of follow the same format. That makes it easier and more accessible for us as the audience, the readers. We know what to expect. It's also easier for us as writers because we know how to write our paper, and this is how we'd go about writing it. Most people writing a paper will use what's called the Imrad structure, or the Imrad structure. The Imrad structure says, hey, let's follow a typical format when writing our paper. The first thing we want to do is the introduction, then the methods, the results, the discussion. All right? Those 4 major sections should be in every single paper. So an introduction is basically a way to tell the audience, hey, this is the topic I'm interested in. This is the big problem in the field. This is my hypothesis and my specific predictions that come from my hypothesis. And it also gives you a place to give some background information. This is what other people have discovered. This is what I'm interested in studying and why I'm interested in studying it. The method section will then tell us a lot about the experiment itself. When did this take place? Where did this take place? How did you set this experiment up? What are your controls? All of those kinds of things. The results section tells us what I found in my experiment. So what are my results? What did I actually show in this experiment? And typically the results section will have some sort of graphics, a graph, a table sometimes a flow chart that helps to visualize the results of the experiment. And then finally a discussion or a conclusion section in which the authors say, hey, this is what the results mean. These results, and tells us, do these results fit with the original hypothesis or not? Do they support the original hypothesis, or does my hypothesis need to be rejected? After the discussion, there is always a reference section as well, and that reference section has all of the literature you've referenced in the paper. Sometimes, and often actually, a scientific paper will have an abstract. An abstract or a summary comes at the beginning of the paper, and that abstract will simply summarize the bulk of the paper, giving us a little bit of introduction, methods, results, and discussion as well. Okay, so scientists have kind of become very uniform in the way they publish their papers. All right, that's this whole section. Oh, I talked about the review process already, I think. The review process is basically, like I said, You finish the paper, you turn it into an editor, the editor looks at it or sends it out to be reviewed and makes the decision, this paper seems valuable, it seems to be an important contribution, it makes an important contribution to this field of research, it's worth publishing, or it's not. We would call this a peer review then, and papers published in peer-reviewed journals are papers that are really thought of as being more valid than those published on, say, someone's blog. I'd rather see and understand and read a paper that's in a peer-reviewed journal than I'm a little more skeptical about papers or articles published individually on someone's blog page, Bob's blog about chickadees or something like that, right? Okay, next page. So sometimes it's hard to read scientific papers. In a scientific paper, there is often discussion about topics that are very, very specific. There might be a whole set of vocabulary or acronyms in this field of biology or chemistry or whatever. In addition, there's often statistical analysis that has to be kind of dealt with. You have to sort of sort out what that means. And the conclusions can sometimes be kind of difficult and lengthy, and it's sometimes hard to pick out, like, what are the important pieces of this paper. So how do you go about reading a scientific paper to get the most out of it, right? What should you do? Well, I recommend looking at the blog post by Jennifer Raft. It's actually published on our Blackboard site under the Achieve button, Exercise 2. So you'll see the blog post by Jennifer Raft. That will help you identify, how do I go about reading a paper? It's a little tricky, but the basic idea is start with the introduction. Read the introduction and kind of figure out what the big problem is that the researchers are interested in studying. Figure out their specific hypothesis and what they're hoping to test, and then move into the into the method section and try to sort out what they're doing, look at the results and the discussion next. And Jennifer Raft does a pretty good job of explaining how you go about reading a scientific paper. Finding scientific papers can be tricky as well. So what if I'm interested in looking for a topic and I don't know where to go to find it? What should I do? Well, first you can decide, where should I look for this paper? You can look for scientific papers on Google Scholar. A lot of people prefer that. Some people prefer to go to the library databases at GVSU. We have access to a huge database, and I like to do that. So I'm going to show you how we would go about finding some scientific papers on a particular topic on our library databases. So let me see if I can get to the library. So you'll need to go to Grand Valley State University, go to the student page in the libraries and click on that. And you arrive here and click on databases. I'm looking for a scientific paper, and there are so many databases at the library that I'm going to have to narrow my search. I think I'm going to search under the Web of Science. It's one of my favorite databases to search for biological papers. So I'm going to click on the W for Web of Science and click on Web of Science. Let's see how this goes. Okay, when I arrive at this Web of Science, I type in some keywords or key phrases. Now, if I'm interested in looking at individual variation in black-capped chickadee behavior, maybe even in particular foraging behavior, I might want to first type in black-capped chickadees because, I've done this a few times. So, and I'm going to need to add a row because I want to add more specific information. Individual variation. Okay, and maybe, I wanted to add one more thing, but we'll just stick with that. And yeah, I'm going to go back. I think I want to go back and add something else. I want to maybe go backward. Let's see if I can just click backward. All right, I'm going to add another row. I want to add something about, at least in my topic, foraging behavior. Okay, that's feeding behavior, by the way. Okay, so I decide to look at these three topics and merge them and look at the results. There are something like 29 results here. Great, I have tons to look for. Individual variation in winter foraging of black-capped chickadees. That's a study from the 1989. That's a pretty old study. It's a classic. There's another one in the same way. This is this third paper is kind of funny. It's my paper. Individual variation in black-capped chickadee, foraging behavior in response to a predator model. I don't need to look at that paper. I've seen it before. And I can kind of scroll down and look for papers that interest me. I'm kind of interested in this classic paper up here, individual variation in foraging of black-capped chickadees. And so I'm going to try to get it at GVSU. I can also look at the abstract first to see if it suits my purposes. So I get this, and I don't know, I guess I'm just going to click on something. Find this article in full text. That's what I really want to do. I don't know if that'll work or not. Sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly how it works. Ah, it worked. So here is the article that I hunted for, I searched for, and now I can take a look at it. I can read the abstract. I can look at the entire paper and learn more about this topic. I like to use the library databases. Other people like Google Scholar better. But what if I get to an article and I can't get it at GVSU? Should I just give up? No. You can fill out a request form with GVSU. It'll let you do that right from the library site. And the library then will find the paper and send it to you electronically. It's awesome. It usually only takes a day or two before they do it. So when you are doing a library search, whether it's in Bio 120 or some other upper level class or a totally different course not related to biology, remember that you can ask the library to find this reference for you and they will send it to you electronically. It's so cool. All right, let's go back to where we were. So finding articles is, I'm not really sure where we were. Finding scientific papers is not really that challenging. We have so many resources to find them. Now, one other topic that I think our lab manual talks about is explaining science papers. How do we explain what a paper means to, say, the average person, like your roommate? It's like, well, what did that paper mean that you just read? And you're like, I don't know. There is a very long handbook, like a 52-page article that you have access to on our Blackboard site under Exercise 2 that you could read to learn about explaining scientific papers. It's a great resource. We'll leave it there, but don't read the whole thing. Don't read the whole thing at all. But the basic idea is you need to think about your audience. Who are your audience? What do they know about the topic already? Right? How much education do they have in this area? And what is the basic point of your research so that it makes the most sense to the people that are listening? Like, tell the people listening, this is what I wanted my research to look at. This is the question I asked. These are the results. And so I think it means X, Y, Z. Have to be pretty straightforward. Okay? All right. So you've read the lab manual. Now it's time to kind of go back and take a look at a couple more things. Whoops, I'm going to go back into my Achieve site. Exercise 2. I could take the pre-lab quiz. I might want to just kind of review the documents before starting my pre-lab quiz. Particularly, I think I would want to look at the Raft document on how to read a scientific paper. So I'm going to just click on that. How to read a scientific paper. It's really a blog. It comes from an online source, but here you can read it. The first part is really kind of background information. This is kind of nice. Okay, Jennifer Raff. Right here we've got some very specific information and then a description of that information that helps us reading the paper. Okay, that's about the only other thing I'll need to read before I take the pre-lab quiz. Now I'm going to take the pre-lab quiz. When I'm done with that, I'm going to move into the worksheet assignment. The worksheet assignment, don't pick up the one from here. Pick up the worksheet assignment from our assignment site on Blackboard. So let's go back to our original Blackboard spot, go to my worksheet assignments. I've read the manual, I've read the Jennifer Raff blog, and I took the quiz. Now I'm ready to do the worksheet. Exercise 2, here's our worksheet. I'm going to click on this and open it up. And you can see it's worth 14 points. You can see how the points are distributed. And now we got to figure out what we're doing. Okay, so for this assignment, we're going to read a science article. You get to choose. I've chosen 4 possible articles for you, and you get to pick one of them. So one of them is called Dung Beetles Use the Milky Way for Orientation. This sounds kind of cool to me. The second is Money and Transmission of Bacteria. How does bacteria get moved around on money? Number 3, Bacterial Contamination of Shopping Carts and Approaches to Control. Oh, that sounds rather interesting. I mean, especially since we've been dealing with COVID. That's obviously a viral contaminant, but still be interesting. And then here's another article. The Effects of Size and Residency on Fighting Outcomes in the Fiddler Crab. This is very much up my line of research in animal behavior. So you get to look at all of these articles and pick one and read it. All right? You're going to report the citation for the article in this first box. I mean, it's just a copy and paste, but I am going to tell you that I'd like you to use the APA style referencing. And there are several online sources for APA style referencing. So if you ever need to build an APA reference list, use one of these tools. I like the Another Tool link to be able to build your references. And then you're going to answer some questions. You're going to read the paper, starting with the introduction, and then learning about the background information and the hypotheses. Then you're going to move on and read the methods section. Here, after reading the methods section, you're going to draw a picture, a flow chart or a diagram of how they did the experiment and take a picture of it and insert it. For the results section, you have one simple question. The basic question is, what did they find? You might have trouble summarizing their research in 1 or 2 sentences, but do your best. And what did it mean? What is the author's conclusion? Do the data fit with their hypothesis? Do they support their hypothesis? What do you think? Then you can go back and read the abstract or the summary. And once you've read the abstract or the summary, you can answer that question. Now, explaining wonderful things. What if you had to communicate to just a general audience about this paper? Answer a couple of questions about that. And finally, you're going to find a scientific paper that's related to the first paper you read. Right? You're going to need to think of some keywords or phrases that you might use to find a good paper. You're going to then use Google Search or the GVSU library, Google Scholar, or the GVSU library to find an article. Once you've found several articles, pick one. Record its citation here. Tell us where you got it from, and tell me what the big question is in this paper. What is the paper trying to address? And take a picture of the first page of the paper, plop it in here. And then you're done. So your assignment will be completed. And that's it for now. And this is exercise 2. I hope this goes smoothly for you. If you have questions, be sure to ask me. Thanks. I'm going to turn this off.